was a fun conversation with Patrick. We obviously we dig into the details. He's got a new kind of hedging offering for different companies. We go particularly into DATS. I think this is also
Yeah.
honestly, I think this is a great product for like probably institutional investors, family offices. But we definitely dive pretty damn deep on the DATS section of this as well.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Definitely, I mean, something that is collateralized versus an uncollateralized situation that most have to deal with. Managing that downside protection, especially in from a DAT perspective or Treasury perspective, I think is definitely a unique and interesting product that I could see getting a lot of traction going forward for sure.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's cool that they have that the fully collateralized aspect where you're, I mean, literally the I don't know market maker that the hedger on the other end of that is putting up that full capital to hedge it.
Yeah. I know too, as we talked about, we talked about real time a couple of weeks ago or a week ago, whatever it was. Uh, that proved, it would have been very helpful for the market if they would utilize a hedge situation like that for sure.
Yeah, 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 100%. Definitely some unique aspects, especially I keep going back to the DATS, but it's really interesting to think about the DATS where in the future maybe they'll be hedging, maybe they won't. We'll see how it plays out. But I think it's cool to just
Yeah.
see new products in the industry, come to life like this.
Yeah, yeah. Even just kind of where he started from innovation and coming from traditional Wall Street background, seeing an opportunity, kind of mentioning that there's been a lack of innovation and seeing where kind of the market needs to go and where crypto has a unique opportunity for their product market fit. I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. So we'll get into
Yeah.
this. Without further ado, let's go to the podcast. Welcome to the All Funds Network podcast. My name is Mike Schroeder. Today I'm here with my co-host Skyler Steinke, and we are joined by Patrick Wood. Patrick is the CEO of Delphx Capital Markets. Patrick, pleasure to have you on today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let's kick it off with your background and the origin story. Give us the brief on your background, and I'd love to see kind of how you saw the problems in the market where you guys created Delphx, and we'll get into that story there. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, what was it about Canada? Just easier regulations? I want to get into your product for sure, but I'm curious. So
Yeah.
the you know restarting almost like a company, like what was your kind of thought process between we could keep Delphx going versus starting a new company? Hmm. Hmm.
Hmm. Push and pull. Yeah. Right. Cat's out of the bag. Yeah. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's get into your product a little bit. What are you guys offering? Hmm. Yeah, for those listening, yeah, you mentioned like 3.15, I think you said, like, is a number. Like what exactly do these downgrades do to a company? Hmm. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah.
Could you real quick
Yeah.
just Kager for those listening?
Very cool. Yeah. Mhm. Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. It was a little rough. Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. I have one question for you, Patrick, because this actually comes up quite a bit, I think, in conversations with folks who come from a traditional Wall Street background and then get into the crypto markets or blockchain. I'm just curious. I mean, you had a little bit, of exposure early on to blockchain companies, but what was the thought process going into that? You saw it. You mentioned Wall Street wasn't innovating. You mentioned your team was kind of looking at opportunities. I mean, there's a lot of people that have fear. They see that, but they just don't understand it, or the fear just doesn't allow them to pull the trigger. I'm just curious how you guys got over that hump and saw the innovation and said, "Hey, let's pull the trigger and move forward." Yeah, yeah, right. It's a great point. That's the status quo right there. No, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. Nobody wants to be first. That's great. Yeah, yeah,
Let's get into that. So I'm a company that's got
yeah.
BTC on the balance sheet, a DAT like we've been digital asset treasury like we've been talking about. What exactly am I buying? What triggers a payout? And what happens operationally when the market moves against me? Exactly. Hmm. Okay, so let me repeat that back to you, make sure I understand it. So, okay, so Bitcoin or MicroStrategy at $125, $125,000 per Bitcoin, they implement this hedge, if you will. When the price goes below 108, they're totally covered. So on one side of it, you got the premium that I'm paying as MicroStrategy to get this hedge. On the other end of it, you got one of these market makers that are putting that, I guess, put number, if you will, that 108. They are putting $108,000 in for every single Bitcoin that I have into a treasury. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. To continue with the mechanisms, though, talk. Let's get into the details more with that aspect. So, you got this market maker. They're putting in the 108,000. Now what? Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense because then I
Yeah.
assume, on the other end of that, the market maker, they're doing whatever they do. They put up that capital, so MicroStrategy, our example company is protected, and then that market maker is doing whatever they're doing. They're shorting it. They got their puts. They got their own hedges. Yeah, yeah.
Mm. Yeah. 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 So I guess, yeah, on that point, Patrick, we can kind of appreciate kind of the clarity there. What should the treasurer's demand from hedge providers then regarding transparency going forward? What are your thoughts there relative to that? Mhm. Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You think is it like the counterparty risk aspect, you think?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Hmm. Right. Right.
When I think about your product too, I mean, one of the I maybe something that like a treasury person would think, of is market timing. Uh, how do you like, what does the duration look like for this product? And as again, coming back to like being a treasury person, how should they be thinking about it? Because, in your example, it's great where, you know, you got the protection below 108, Bitcoin goes to 50K. Is it time to cash in, or do you wait for do you just kind of leave it there like, oh, like it could still go to 20K? How do you think about that aspect? Because at that point you almost become not only a treasury company, almost a fund to some degree, or an active investor. Yeah,
Yeah.
reset. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. 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 Right. Yeah. Yeah. I guess, and Patrick, your product is issued in the format of, is it a private placement then structure? Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. Which funds and institutions totally understand. Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah. Right. 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 Yeah. Well, that's the holy right. That's the holy grail for everybody. And just for everybody, NFTs, non-fungible tokens. We're talking about tokenization or fractionalization of the product, correct? Yeah. Got it. Yeah.
Yep.
Amazing.
Do you think this solution? I mean, obviously, this is more of a feeling. I don't have data to back this up. It feels like Bitcoin's become less volatile over the last, give or take year and a half, at least to some degree, maybe. But these altcoins are definitely, I would say, not in the same manner. Even over, a couple weeks ago, we had a pretty big drawdown, big liquidation day. Solana is just like one example, went from, I don't know, 250 to below 200, maybe, 175 or so. That's significant. We're talking, I don't know, 30%. Do you think this is a product that's even more applicable for, altcoins? Makes sense.
Yeah.
Be a more liquid token.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Tell us about like your target audience. So obviously we've been talking about DATS here. Are there other folks in the market that you think would be a good fit for this product?
Mm. Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I like
Yeah.
your tokenization aspect. I think that could fit in well.
Yeah.
Um,
Definitely.
with the other thing I was thinking about with in our pre-call, I know you had some thoughts about some of these different DATs and how they're operating. Uh, what are some of the problems that you see in the market right now on that side of things?
But you will. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about the
Yeah.
there's yeah, there's a ton. It's
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting to see how the markets evolve. The uh especially with the MNAV, it's one of those stats. It's interesting. Like you said, like somebody maybe the move is to just come in and buy them if they trade below MNAV. And I guess really the game for these guys is, can we keep it above MNAV? But I guess more importantly, I assume kind of the whole premise of these DATs is really price goes up. Like, we're a believer in Bitcoin. It's like long term, maybe it's 100,000 today. MNAV's at one, price of Bitcoin goes to
Yeah.
200,000, now MNAV's at two. And now we even have more, capital to deploy. Or, but they're banking on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
What I guess when it comes to, I mean, this is something I haven't thought about, but maybe you've thought about it a little bit more. The aspect, all right, MicroStrategy's got this stat, they're paying 10%. Now they got to pay 7% premiums, on a hedge. Does the math for them?
Yeah. With that scenario. Yeah. 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 Mm. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Pat, this has been great. You've given us a lot to think about. I think what you guys are doing is interesting, and I'm curious to see how the market reception is to it over the next couple of years. Um,
Yeah.
where could people go to connect with you and learn more about Delphx?
Great. That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, this has been great. And we appreciate the time, Patrick. We'll make sure to put all that info in the show notes as well.